Episode 7, The Mothman. Hey y'all, I'm Heather, and this is Poisoned Appalachia. Now, this was one I've been excited about doing since I started. I was trying to hold off a little longer so I could be better established, but the Mothman Festival is this weekend, and I thought, well, now's as good a time as ever. This will probably be a longer one. I grew up hearing this legend. Honestly, I don't think I've ever really believed in it. And I still don't really, but some of the evidence is compelling and it makes you wonder. You never know. Near Point Pleasant, West Virginia, on November 15th, 1966, about midnight, a black 57 Chevy Bel Air, driven by a local named Roger Scarberry, came upon something he and the others in his car will never forget. It was near midnight, and Scarberry was driving back to the town of Point Pleasant with his wife Linda and their friends Steve and Mary Mallett. The two couples were passing close to the abandoned TNT munitions plant used during World War II. Suddenly, Steve Mallett noticed two glowing red lights in the distance. Standing by the road was a creature 7 feet in height, with wings folded on its back, and its eyes were bright red. The area they were in, known as the TNT area, is officially called the McClintic Wildlife Management Area. It's called the TNT area because during World War II, that region, more than 8,000 acres, was devoted to an ammunition manufacturing facility that employed a few thousand people at its peak. And actually, I've read something, but I only read it in one article, so I don't know if it's true or not. But they said that it was so top secret that the workers would be driven in there blindfolded and only know what they were doing and nobody else. So I don't know if that's true or not, though, because I didn't see it anywhere else. But it's pretty interesting. For safety reasons, the explosives were stored in bunkers or igloos strategically scattered across the territory and disguised by a thick layer of earth. They kind of look like post-apocalyptic hobbit houses to me. I'll probably put some pictures on Instagram so you can see them if you follow me on Instagram. At the height of production here, this World War II factory cranked out 500,000 pounds of TNT per day. It closed in 1945, but explosives remain stored on the site. Some explosives likely remain on site even today. In 2010, for example, a storage igloo containing 20,000 pounds of various explosives actually exploded. But the area was pretty much abandoned after the war, converted in part to a wildlife management area and partly a landfill. Then, by no surprise, it was discovered in the 80s that the land was severely contaminated by explosive byproducts. The TNT area was horribly polluted, and many of the ingredients that went into making the ammunition were dumped and left to seep into the local ponds. Pond 13 is known for being affected the worst. A woman fishing in that pond discovered a red water seep and pointed it out to a wildlife biologist. He sent it to the lab and discovered that it did contain levels of TNT. The area was then added to a federal list of hazardous waste sites eligible for cleanup. The TNT area became a Superfund site in 1983 and is still undergoing cleanup and decontamination. The Old North Power Plant building that once stood on the property was demolished in the early 1990s. It was thought to be unsafe because of the frequent trespassers and the state of the building's decay. This is where the Mothman was supposedly seen a lot, so a lot of people came there, and of course, I'm sure that they probably made it a lot worse than it was. But the Division of National Resources leased out several dozen of the concrete TNT bunkers in the McClintic Wildlife Area for business looking for unique storage, and people still use that to this day. The Mothman Festival still gives tours of the TNT area each year. And side note, I've personally heard about this area, but I've actually never been there. It's kind of right across the river from me, and they say that it's a big party area, and a lot of dark stuff goes on there. Like Satan worship and witchcraft, which they always say with a whisper. Satan worship and witchcraft. But I've never actually been out there, so I really don't know. I do know a lot of people go out there, though. The first sighting in Point Pleasant occurred on November 15, 1966. So that's the first one that was reported, but as I said, it was reported that several people had seen the big bird out that way prior to this. On November 1st, 1966, at the Armory, which is right near the TNT area, a local National Guardsman witnessed a human-like figure perched in the tree. He stated it was brown. On November 12, 1966, Kenneth Duncan of Blue Creek and 4 other men were digging a grave for his father-in-law, Homer Smith, in a cemetery near Clendenin, West Virginia. He claimed to see a man-like figure that flew out from some nearby trees and glided low over their heads. The men helping were Robert Lovejoy, William Poole and Andrew Godby of Blue Creek, West Virginia, and M.O. Gibson of Quincy, West Virginia. These other men did not see the creature before it flew away, but Kenneth said that the brown creature lifted off beyond the trees, and it was no bird, it was humanoid. It was gliding through the trees and was in sight for about a minute, said Kenneth. He was baffled. It didn't look like any kind of bird, but seemed to be a man with wings. The men only discussed the sighting with a few friends and would have been completely forgotten about if others hadn't started claiming to see a winged man. It was the November 15th, 1966 Scarberry Mountains Mothman sighting that caused Kenneth Duncan to report his encounter. Some retroactively consider this sighting to be the Mothman, which is what was now coined by the newspapers for the Scarberry Mountains story. After this night, there were quite a few sightings, and the area had created almost a hysteria about it. They wouldn't let kids out at recess, and people would avoid going out at night. During 1966 to 67, there were a lot of reports of UFOs in the area. As soon as people started reporting the Mothman sightings and UFO sightings, another strange thing appeared in Point Pleasant: the Men in Black. Here come the Men in Black. I mentioned them briefly in the Flatwoods Monster episode, but they were seen by many people in Point Pleasant. The Men in Black were very intimidating. No one knew if they were government agents or aliens or what they were. They would go to local residents' houses telling people not to discuss it. They even spoke to newspaper reporter Mary Heyer, who had been reporting on everything. The Men in Black were in the area during all the sightings. There were other sightings of the Mothman throughout the time. There were actually over 100 sightings from November 15th, 1966 to December 1967. It's one of those things where everyone saw the Mothman, but nobody wants to come forward about it, so there are very few written accounts of the sightings. The Men in Black were described as having pale faces and black suits with black fedoras. Some were reported as having dark features, an Eastern European look. They said they had expressionless faces and strange eyes, sometimes covered by dark glasses. Their movements also appeared to be inhuman in nature. Mary Heyer said that they never blinked when they were in her presence. Some Men in Black were even reported to dress in Air Force and military uniforms, but always with something just a bit wrong, such as an insignia, being in the wrong place, wearing the wrong shoes, or driving a car that's not standard for a military officer. They usually traveled in groups of 2 or 3 and had a knack for knowing things about the witnesses that they taunted, things that only the witnesses knew. There were even reports of them being masters of illusion by way of being able to make themselves appear in the distance without a trace, appear and disappear without a trace. Some have reported them carrying sophisticated gadgets, and one woman claimed that the Men in Black erased part of her memory. Mothman witness Linda Scarberry said in an interview the Men in Black wore black suits, black hats, and sunglasses. They drove black cars, Cadillacs, I think. They looked like human beings, but their skin was somewhat transparent. You could see the veins in their hands very clearly. Their fingers were longer than a normal person's fingers as well. Daddy shook hands with them, and they were awkward in shaking hands. They seemed to not know what to do or how to shake hands. She said one of the cars would follow us around. There were 3 men in the car. The Men in Black went so far as to follow us through the drive-thru of a restaurant. We were afraid to turn around and just looked at them in the mirror. A man and a woman carrying a camera visited Mothman witness Stephen Mary Mallet, wanting to take a picture of them. The Mallets took down the license plate of the Volkswagen, but the police said the number was non-existent. One of the few sightings that were documented about the Mothman was seen by Faye Leaport and her brother, and when they went to the TNT area because they'd heard of it at school. She said they were about 2 blocks away or so from the area when something large jumped on their hood and stood and stared at them. She said they were frozen in time for an unknown bit of time. She said it left and they headed towards the sheriff's department to report what they saw. They went back the next day and the TNT area was closed off. The military had it closed off and the Men in Black were there too. The only other sightings I could find about Mothman sightings were reported in the Gettysburg Times. They reported 8 additional sightings in a short span of 3 days after the first claims. This included 2 volunteer firefighters who said they saw a very large bird with red eyes. Newell Partridge, a resident of Salem, West Virginia, claimed that he saw strange patterns appearing on his television one night, and then that was followed by a mysterious sound just outside of his home. Shining a flashlight towards the direction of the noise, Partridge supposedly witnessed two red eyes resembling bicycle reflectors looking back at him. Strangely enough, a week or two prior to all this, there's a strange account that John Keel believed to be connected to this too. Woodrow Derenberger, who lived in Mineral Wells, West Virginia, had a very strange experience. On Wednesday, November 22nd, 1966, about 7:30 p.m., he was returning from Marietta, Ohio, to his home. He claimed he saw a metallic flying cigar-shaped craft. The ship traveled right by his truck and blocked the roadway ahead and gradually made him slow down to a stop on the side of the road. Woodrow also described the vehicle as resembling a kerosene lamp chimney. The aircraft was hovering about 12 inches off the road. A door opened on the craft and a being exited the ship, and the door shuts with a loud thunk behind him. Later, the vehicle climbed about 50 feet in the air above the highway. The being walked right up to Derenberger's truck window. He described the being as looking like an ordinary man off the street, but 6 feet tall, about 35 years in age, with olive complexion, dark brown hair, and wearing a glossy, metallic, dark blue coat. The man spoke to Woodrow telepathically. His mouth did not move. Instead, he had a fixed smile on his face. The man looked in through the truck's window and said, without saying, something along the lines of, "Roll down your window, I want to talk to you." During their communication, the man had called himself Indrid Cold. He told Woodrow that he meant him no harm. Derenberger said, I was very frightened of him, and as far as I could understand, this was all mental. There were not spoken words from him. I knew that he was asking me, but he stood there and his mouth did not move. He had a smile on his face. He appeared very courteous and friendly. Indrid Cold and Mr. Derenberger's conversation lasted about 10 minutes. Cold told him, "We eat, we breathe, we sleep, we even bleed as you do." Before returning to his flying craft, he said, "We will see you again." Derenberger later reported this event to the police. Woodrow's story gained traction in the media, gaining news coverage and attention after the Parkersburg police were convinced of his story. A representative of the Air Force even contacted him soon after his accounts were documented. On November 3rd, 1966, during the media storm, he went on live TV in Parkersburg, where he was interviewed by the state police, the Wood County Airport, and the city police, and representatives from the Dayton Ohio Air Force Base. After the interview aired, an older man claimed that he too saw a figure matching the description of Indrid Cold on Route 77, trying to flag him down, but he was afraid to stop. Derenberger's conversation with Cold could be corroborated. Other people claimed to see lights and fluttering vehicles at the same time and the same instant on the road. There were several witnesses that reported seeing Woodrow stopped on the highway talking to this man and even saw the flying craft parked on the side of the road. Reports poured in of strange lights in the sky and beings, all at the same time at the same place on Highway I-77 during the night of November 2nd, 1966. It was big news in the area for almost 3 weeks. The Parkersburg News chronicled Derenberger's story and a number of forthcoming witnesses, many of whom asked to remain anonymous or have their names withheld. Over the course of the month that followed, Derenberger claimed that he was visited by Indrid Cold many times, and that he even took him on his spaceship to his planet. Indrid Cold would also appear at Woodrow's front door. His wife and children even knew that this Indrid Cold was paying him visits, and that they eventually came forward stating that they too saw him and other strange beings. Woodrow's wife was terrified and stated that these beings were much like us, traveled in everyday cars, dressed in everyday clothes, but were not human in origin. There was even one time where Mr. Derenberger disappeared for 6 months and said he was with Indrid Cold. This is what members of his family actually believed. He would also receive mental messages from his long-distance friend, and they would come suddenly and leave piercing migraine headaches. His residents would also receive strange phone calls. Sometimes there were threats to stop talking about his experience. Other times there were odd beeps and electronic hums. Sometimes it was just silence. The family changed their number to an unlisted one, but somehow the calls continued. His story gained media attention, with locals would flock to his house all hours of the day and night and wait in crowds in his driveway to catch a glimpse of his friend Indrid Cold. Some locals claim to actually have seen spaceships land there. And on one occasion, Two men armed with loaded rifles were heading towards the Derenberger's property. They observed a black Volkswagen enter his yard. A peculiar man dressed in all black suit with tan skin exited and talked with Woodrow before leaving. The hunters were disappointed. They'd waited even longer, wanting to see something truly terrifying. But maybe they already had. Woodrow hadn't heard of the men in black, but after his visit, he was extremely frightened by them. Derenberger eventually decided to seek medical attention and the opinion of a Parkersburg psychiatrist. He not only left with a clean bill of health and absolutely no evidence of chemical imbalance or disruption, but the very doctor endures a reaction soon after their meeting. He's also contacted by Ingrid Cold. He doesn't reach out by phone, but telepathically. So was Indercold connected to any of the Mothman, or did he just happen to appear around the same time? No one really knows, but John Keel thought that there was connection. And since he's kind of the expert on the Mothman phenomenon, maybe he's right. There's not a lot, but there's some about Indercold in the Mothman movie even, so I don't know. It's hard to tell really, but it's just kind of strange it all happened at the same time. Also, the same date as the Derenbergers experience on 11/2/66, a lady in Gallipolis, Ohio, which is where I live, whoop whoop, right across the river from Point Pleasant, a woman states that there was a bright flash in the sky above her. She saw a very large cylinder-shaped object land in the parking lot, and two men emerged in business suits. These men started to ask her questions, and they had a strange dialect or accent with their speech. There were also several UFO sightings at the time, even near the TNT area. Were they all connected? Or was it just different things happening? No one knows for sure, but it would make sense if these sightings were all real, that they would all be somehow connected. The Mothman wasn't really seen much for several months until around November of 1967. He started being seen a lot then. It escalated up until around December 15, 1967. On December 15, 1967, the Silver Bridge collapsed amid heavy rush hour traffic, resulting in the deaths of 46 people, 2 of whom were never found. Investigation of the wreckage soon pointed to the failure of a single eye bar in one of the suspension chains as a primary cause, a finding noted in a preliminary report released within 10 months of the collapse. However, to explain why the eye bar failed, a failure triggered by a flaw just 1.1 inches deep, which led to a fracture, required significantly more time and effort to uncover. With the final accident report taking 3 years to complete, the collapse had led to significant changes in the way bridges in the U.S. are expected and maintained today. The Silver Bridge was built in 1928, connected Point Pleasant, West Virginia, and Gallipolis, Ohio. On December 15, 1967, it crumbled to the Ohio River during rush hour, killing the 46 people without warning. And it was one of the worst disasters in American history. But some people claim that they saw the Mothman on top of the bridge. Some people claim they saw him around it. I don't know. Right after that, kind of the Mothman sightings had stopped, but they're not really sure what happened. Investigators blamed the poor design of the bridge structure and excessive loads for the collapse. It was determined that the entire bridge fell apart because of that one link. And in the future, I plan on doing a whole episode just about the bridge, so I'll be going in a lot more detail about that later. As I said, Mothman sightings came to a stop after the Silver Bridge collapse, leading to the theory that the Mothman and the bridge disaster were directly related. The theory was heightened in 1975 by the book The Mothman Prophecies by John Keel. Keel researched the Mothman phenomenon during the months prior to the disaster and believed supernatural forces were at work in the area of Point Pleasant. Weeks leading up to the collapse, the Mothman was frequently seen. Also, many people had premonitions of the bridge collapse, nightmares and visions, some attributed to the Mothman's presence, some to the UFO activity. On November 19, 1967, Mary Heyer told Keel, "I had a terrible nightmare. There were a lot of people drowning in the river, and Christmas packages were floating everywhere in the water. It's like something awful was going to happen." When Keel returned to Point Pleasant around Thanksgiving 1967, people in the area were having dreams and nightmares about a coming disaster. Virginia Thomas had told them about people dying in the water of the nearby Ohio River. A couple of sightings of the Mothman were said to have occurred near the bridge before the incident. Rumors eventually spread that the bridge collapse was connected to the Mothman in some way and that he could have been warning them or a dark premonition. This was the beginning of the Mothman being associated as an omen of doom. Mothman eventually began reporting being seen all over the world before tragedy struck, and the creature went from small-town folklore to global monster icon. Did the Mothman have anything to do with the bridge collapse, or was he just there to warn people? No one knows. Since that fall night in 1966, speculation about who, what, and why Mothman is have spread through both believers and non-believers. The most common theory among the debunkers is the Mothman is simply a bird. Some speculate that it's an owl. The Huntington Herald-Dispatch reported a mere 4 days after the first incident that the West Virginia University professor Dr. Robert Smith was certain that the Mothman was just a sandhill crane that had taken a detour during its normal migration. Though he admitted that not all of the details fit the crane, nor was he aware of any confirmed sightings in the area until around that time, even though the occasional sandhill crane had been spotted in the area before. On the other side of the speculation, some people believe that Mothman is some sort of demon. Others believe it's simply a creature we previously didn't know existed. Still others have chosen to believe that the Mothman is not only evil or malicious entity, but that is not only not an evil or malicious entity, but that it came to Point Pleasant, West Virginia to help. I've read that something like the Mothman has appeared before other disasters, leading people to believe it may be a harbinger of death. I've read that it could be a banshee from Irish legend. John Keel seemed to think it was an angel of some sort. Others have called it a demon. I've seen that it could be an extraterrestrial or even an ultra-terrestrial from a being from another dimension. Another theory is a callback to my first episode. Was the Mothman sent by Chief Cornstalk to carry out his curse? I've read that he could be a thunderbird, which would definitely fit in with the curse of Chief Cornstalk. The thunderbird was a symbol of strength and also an omen of war, so maybe Chief Cornstalk was finally calling on his curse in the area. Or was the Mothman just a bird that had mutated by the chemicals of TNT? No one really knows. Do you think it was real? I don't really believe in a giant creature terrorizing the area, but as I said in another episode, I do try to keep an open mind, and none of us really know what's out there. And whatever the witnesses experienced, it was real to them. I don't believe they made the story up, so discounting that is discounting them. But I suppose I won't really believe it until I see it. And honestly, I hope I don't see it. If you want to learn more about the Mothman, there are a ton of documentaries and books out there. Of course, check out Point Pleasant, West Virginia, if you can. Here's my little tourism spiel, and since I'm from this area, it's pretty near and dear to me. Point Pleasant's a cute little town, offering quaint shops and a lot of history. While you're there, go across the river to Ohio and visit Gallipolis. Or Gallipolis. I usually say Gallipolis. I don't know why I just said Gallipolis. But a lot of people call it Gallipolis. But anyways, it's also a quaint little river town with a lot of history. You can visit the historic Our House Museum, John G. Historical Center, and the Railroad Museum. And about 20 miles out Route 35, you'll encounter Rio Grande, Ohio. Yes, Rio Grande is what they call it. And that's where Bob Evans started his restaurant business. You can visit his home and tour the area. There are some great hiking trails there too. But let me go back to Mason and Point Pleasant, in Mason County, I mean. So the third weekend in September, every year is the Mothman Festival. It's the biggest festival in West Virginia, and it's pretty fun. Of course, lots of vendor booths and festival food, but they have speakers there and entertainment. They even have a 5K. Also, they have bus tours to the TNT area where it all started. You can take like hay rides out there too. It's crowded, so I would definitely suggest getting there early. As of this recording, it's this weekend, September 21st and September 22nd of 2024. Also, if you're in the area this weekend, in Jackson County, Ohio, which is just about 30 minutes away, they're having their annual Apple Festival. Make it a festival weekend and check out both. If you don't go during the festival, Point Pleasant's still a good little town to visit. You can stop by the Mothman Museum, the only Mothman museum in the world. Definitely check out the Mothman statue downtown. You gotta get your pic with him. Stop by and visit the River Museum. Also make sure to check out the murals and the flood walls depicting the history of the area. There's also a pretty cool little Chief Cornstalk statue there too. Make sure you drive by the jail and check out the memorial where the 5 people were killed during the explosion in the 1970s. I mentioned that in my first episode. Tuindewee Park is right there too, and that's where the Ohio and Kanawha rivers meet. Tuindewee State Park has an 84-foot monument commemorating those who died during the Battle of Point Pleasant, which some say is the first battle of the Revolutionary War. Along with the Mansion House that's open May through October, offering more historical information for visitors. Just out the road is Cradell Park, where you can go kayaking and fishing, and also visit Fort Randolph, which you may remember from my Curse of Chief Cornstalk episode. It was originally built in 1776 on the site of Fort Blair. Fort Randolph is now located in Cradell Park, which is actually about a mile from its original site. They moved it. It offers historical reenactments, events, and tours on the weekends during the months of May through December. Also in December, visit Cradell Park's light show, and there you can see a Mothman light display as well as Chief Cornstalk. On the other side of Point Pleasant, you can visit the McClintock Wildlife Area, where the TNT area is. The website says, located 5 miles north of Point Pleasant, the McClintock Wildlife Management Area offers a variety of outdoor activities such as fishing, hunting, and hiking. Of course, this is also a site where Mothman was seen, so you can explore that area. You can even explore the bunkers where explosives were stored during World War II, and supposedly some are still stored there, so you might be a little careful when you go that way. Also, while you're out there, you can visit the West Virginia State Farm Museum. It says on the website, see the entire state's farm life heritage preserved on the peaceful grounds of the West Virginia State Farm Museum. The museum allows visitors to glimpse into the important history of farming, a functional blacksmith shop, and more. A self-claimed work in progress. The attractions change each year, and of course there are a few adorable farm animals around too. And if you're there at Christmas time, they have a really cute light display too. So there's that. Also, while you're in Point Pleasant, you can visit the historic Lowe Hotel. It's located in the heart of Point Pleasant, right across from the Mothman Museum, actually. The structure was built in 1901 and originally named the Spencer Hotel in honor of J.S. Spencer. Then operated by two brothers, the hotel was purchased by the Lowe family in 1929 after the stock market crash and remained named the Lowe Hotel. The hotel is now owned and managed by Ruth Rush and Marcia Finley. That's actually Ruth Rush and Marcia Finley. Sorry about that, I read that wrong. They purchased the Lowe Hotel in the 1990s. A visit kind of takes a step back in time with today's conveniences. The Finleys have been continually upgrading them and building and adding their respective touch to the business. The friendly atmosphere and hospitality create a very pleasant and restful experience for the traveler. Also, fun fact, we had my high school prom there in the ballroom. I was a freshman that year, but went, and I just thought it was big crap that year. Anyways, I also heard the Lowe Hotel is haunted, so that might be a fun place to go for the ghost hunters. Also, while there, visit the Village Pizza Inn, where you can get their famous Mothman pizza. If you'll remember, that's where the Scarberries and Mallets stopped after they had their first Mothman sighting. You can check out What's the Scoop Ice Cream Shop for some fun Mothman treats, or the Coffee Grinder Coffee Shop right down on Main Street. I know this has been a long one, but it's my backyard monster, so he's personal to me. He's my Mothman. So I hope you enjoyed the Mothman, and if you're ever in the area, check it all out. I'm going to be walking through the Mothman Fest this weekend myself, passing out business cards and stickers, and I'll be wearing a Poisoned Appalachia t-shirt. So if you see me, stop by and say hey. Catch me on socials under Poisoned Appalachia. I'm on TikTok, Facebook, Threads, YouTube, Instagram, and even X. Just type in Poisoned Appalachia. Also, you can contact me through email at poisonedappalachia@gmail.com. Once again, to everyone, thanks so much for listening. Thanks for your support, and I appreciate every single one of you. See you next week.